horrific threats of violence, targeting Jewish businesses, targeting Jewish daycares with hate. This needs to stop. This is not who we are as Canadians. This is something that is not acceptable in Canada. Period. Period. The rise of Islamophobia we're seeing across this country and around the world is also unacceptable. The expressions of hate against Muslims, against Palestinians, against anyone waving a Palestinian flag. This is unacceptable. This is not who we are as Canadians. And if Canada can't figure this out, tell me what corner of the world is going to figure this out.
That's the Prime Minister just a few moments ago, passionate and fiery. Haven't seen him like this in a while. And the stars have aligned on the program today because Tasha Kheiriddin was already lined up to be on the program this morning. Tasha, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks, Elias. Great to be here.
So listen, you know what? And the reason you're on, you published a piece in the National Post and the Post media papers. And here's a quote from it. And boy, it ties into what we heard. Because the Prime Minister is just talking about our who we are as Canadians. Who we are as Canadians. And I'm thinking to myself, well, geez, now you know what a Canadian is? Who we are as Canadians? Wonderful. Here's a line. Here is a line from your piece. We have not only lost our national identity, but are actively repudiating the very things that attracted newcomers here. So, Tasha, put it all together for us this morning. Tell us what it's really all about.
Well, thanks, Elias. First of all, I'll say one other thing before I do that. My Twitter account's been suspended because of this piece.
What? What?
I just noted. I was just logging in to see the Trudeau audio because I was out this morning. I had some meetings and things, and I didn't. So it actually goes to what I was saying because all I said in the piece was that Canada has become a nation of diasporas rather than finding a common purpose or being in a common cause. We basically huddled in our enclaves, whether they are ethnic enclaves, religious enclaves, enclaves based on the color of your skin. We're all divided into others. And increasingly we see violence and hatred on our streets, as the Prime Minister alluded to, because we have not been encouraged because of a legacy of both multiculturalism policies funded by the state and the use by politicians of those policies for their own purposes to divide and conquer at election time, and coupled with identity politics that's been rising, and the idea that everyone has to put themselves in little boxes according to all their beliefs and their characteristics and their identities. All this has resulted in a very balkanized country, and we're seeing now what happens when people bring overseas grievances home, and they're in their fiefdoms and their spaces and their diasporas, and whatever they are, they take those foreign grievances, bring them here, and act them out in our streets. And in this case, now are acting violent toward each other. And that's got to stop. We have to find a way back to finding to standing for those principles, like you said, that Canada is for, which include justice, the rule of law, the sense of equality, and fairness and good government and peace and all those good things that people come here for. And we've lost that.
And who's most responsible for that, Tasha? I know maybe this is the easiest question ever, but the fact now that everything out of Ottawa has to do with identity groups or pandering to cultural communities. And it runs the gamut, by the way. It's ethnicities, it's race, it's sexuality. That's the defining characteristic where everyone's the word balkanized is so appropriate here. Who's most to blame for that, Tasha?
Well, it goes back, like I said, to what I call the state-sanctioned multicultural policies. Pierre Elliott Trudeau, not Trudeau Jr., but it goes back to his dad in the 1970s, that really encouraged newcomers to keep their culture of origin. It was partly a response to the threat of sovereignty and the separatist movement in Quebec. So the idea was, we'll make everyone, we'll dilute the focus. We'll take it away, and we'll encourage people to come here, keep their culture, and build the mosaic that Canada is, right? We're not a melting pot like the U.S. But politicians use that. And over decades, in Quebec, it was no secret. We would call it the ethnic vote. And you would pack buses full of people from various cultural communities to vote for you at nomination time or in elections. And this was used, and so politicians turned a blind eye to the abuse of this. And, the last year we've seen that with China in particular, what's been going on in intimidation of communities by foreign powers. And then in 2000, you had, like I said, the rise of identity politics for the last 20 years. So it really became, it wasn't enough to call yourself Canadian or even hyphenated Canadian. Then you had to define yourself by other things, whether you were privileged or non-privileged or gendered or gender fluid or settler or colonizer, indigenous, like a whole bunch of things that our universities did tons of research on, and lots of academics came out with lots of ideas, filtered into the mainstream. Mm-hmm. And then in 2015, the government layered on Indigenous reconciliation, but the way they did it was shaming Canadians as opposed to building economic reconciliation for the future. It was like, we've been really bad, we've done all these bad things. So at the end of the day, we've basically torn down a lot of what Canada was, which is, we're proud of his accomplishments that we had. We're proud that we stood for, or stand for, supposedly, human rights and democracy and equal opportunity, like I said, and personal freedoms. And these things are in our charter, right? Mm-hmm. But instead, we're basically allowing all sorts of abuse of these things. I mean, hate speech has become a joke. Like, so much hate speech is happening now, and no one's doing anything about it.
Yep.
How do we get here? Like, that's how we got here. And we have to get away from it, because other countries are looking at us and saying, hey, if you can't manage your own stuff, why should we take you seriously?
Yeah, Canada should be the North Star, figuratively and literally. We're with Tasha Kheiriddin, writer, commentator at the National Post. She's got her own Substack as well. Tasha, can we just take it back here to January? Do you remember when the Trudeau government named their special representative against in the fight against Islamophobia, Amira El-Gawabi? And Amira El-Gawabi, just to remind everyone, a person that said French Canadians, Quebecers make her puke. She hates the monarchy. She hates Canada Day. She tells secular Muslims that they cannot question their faith. And this was the person that was picked by this government. Doesn't that say it all about where we're at right now? Doesn't that say everything we need to know about why the last month has been such a mess in this country?
I think it says a lot about it. Yeah, I think that choice, as well as Laith Marouf, who got all sorts of grants from the government and it said all sorts of horrible things, anti-Semitic things. I think we are seeing a double standard in terms of the abuse that Semitic communities, because technically all Middle Eastern communities are Semitic, but when we say anti-Semitic, we refer to the Jewish people mostly. But I think that there's a double standard. I do think so. And the government's very quick to call out Islamophobia and has not been as quick to call out anti-Jewish discrimination or harassment or hate speech. And the Prime Minister did it today, but the reality is that, this disappointment should never have happened. The government, again, I hate to say this, but it is an electoral decision. There are lots of ridings around Toronto in particular where there are large communities of Muslim Canadians, and it's not to say they all think the same, but the government might perceive it that way, and they don't want to lose those votes. They really don't. And I think in Montreal also, I know there's a large Muslim community. We've seen lots of protests. And, as my daughter said, it's you can be in favor of Palestine or a two-state solution, but not in favor of Hamas, and you have to make that distinction. The problem is people aren't making that distinction. Mm-hmm. And no one is going out and saying in these protests, you know what, we think we need a two-state solution, or we think we need justice for Palestinians, but Hamas has to go. I think if that was a message, people would be much more open to and understanding to it. But the problem is that, Gazans themselves conflate their future with Hamas. And voting for Hamas and keeping Hamas in power is not an acceptable thing to anyone who believes in human rights. And what they did is absolutely barbaric, what they did. I'll use that word. They did on October 7th was these were acts not even of war. They were acts of terror and violence and psychopathy. I know journalists who watched the videos of what was done, the body cameras that Hamas, militants had on them when they killed babies. I mean, it boggles the mind that anyone could do that. So I think that, we have to all take a pause and say, well, okay, this happened. We have to acknowledge that. You have to move forward in a sensible way. You can't just run around and say, Palestine to the river to the sea, because you're implying that you're going to wipe out Israel. That is not on. And so, no one, our political class is slow to do that. They're not doing that. Most of them are not doing that.
And just, I want to reiterate what you said there, Tasha. One of the worst things that's happening here is the bigotry of treating one group, cultural group, religious group, as if they all vote and think the same way. The secular Muslim community in this province, which is so impressive, and a lot of them come on this show because I've made a point of it. They disprove that time and time again. And this government likes to view people as gigantic voting blocks. And that
Correct.
To me is that's what's damaging.
Well, I think in fairness, a lot of parties have used people as voting blocks throughout Canadian history, and I know Conservatives use them. I'm like the ethnic vote politics I was talking about, Parizeau, I was talking about during the referendum in '95. This is not new.
Yeah.
But the problem is that it's one thing to say, we're going to appeal to voters in a particular ethnic community on the basis of what we stand for and what Canada stands for, but going a bridge too far and saying we're going to abdicate all our principles and we're going to say, oh, this doesn't matter, we'll turn a blind eye to human rights violations just because we want your votes, that's not acceptable.
Tasha, we have to leave it there. We're getting to Christopher Ski. We'll get the view from the Quebec government coming up next.
Christopher Ski.
Yeah, there you go. Take
Bye.
care. Tasha Kheiriddin from the National Post. Go check out her Substack as well.